Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 489 of Constructive Criticism. I am your host, Easy, and I am joined by my co-host, a man who's got a Tinder date, Mason Clark.
That's not true.
Oh. And sorry for your loss. And Abe Stein. Abe, you won a classic and moved recently.
No, for the real fans of the show, this is Jonathan Skinnick's apartment that you're seeing in the background here. He was on not too long ago.
This year
for a good episode. But I'm spending the holiday cheer with him. I mean, we're both Jewish men who do not have much to do on Christmas exactly. So have some friends over, myself included, and he was gracious enough to let me use the setup to record the podcast. So.
Was Hanukkah dope this year?
It was a pretty good Hanukkah. I had normally we do latkes in my family, maybe I don't know, 2 or 3 nights out of it. My mom this year was like, no, latkes all 8 nights. I was like, you're the best, Mom. So yeah, had mad latkes. It was the best.
For the listeners who might not know, what is that?
Oh, it's like a potato pancake. It's like potato starch, shredded potatoes, onions. You just kind of get the shredded potatoes, make a little potato pancake, and then you fry it in olive oil on both sides. Fantastic with applesauce. Nice. Definitely the best way to eat them.
Yeah, I got offered to go somewhere to have those last year, and I didn't go. But I've actually never had it. But everybody, all my Jewish friends are they're the best. So
I'll have to get you a recipe.
Yeah,
they're just good.
That's an always improving moment for me. I gotta try some latkes. All right. No, we're not going to do Always Improving this week because it's our reflecting on 2023 episode, and some of that will be into the main topic. But if you want to support the show directly, going into 2024, head on over to patreon.com/ccmtg. You can ask Patreon questions. You get early access to the shows when we go live. The live stream. I'm trying to think of the other stuff. The $25 tier you can get T-shirts. There's some stuff over there, so check it out. And then don't forget to check out our sponsor, Untapped.gg. Use the affiliate code in the description of this episode wherever you're listening or watching. They just launched a new feature. That's why I wanted to talk about it this week, where when you're looking at a deck, whether it's draft or constructed, when you're constructing your mana base, it will tell you your percentage of each mana symbol and what percentage of your mana base it is, and it's pretty dope. So was really interesting when I was looking at standard mana bases, being oh, I'm actually maybe a little bit low on this source. So
that's going to expose all the bad mana bases you copy paste off of.
Dude, for real though, right?
Off Fire Shoes Twitter, when you're how did I ever cast any spells when I was playing this deck?
All right, so this one is our reflection episode. So we're going to take a look back through the lens of 2023, and kind of go over some things. Mason, why don't you start us off? Why don't you give us kind of a summary of 2023 and MTG for you, buddy?
I mean, 2023 is definitely the weirdest year for Magic for me ever. I started the year off by working on Modern Horizons for the first 2 months, and to then kicking off coaching as my full-time job. And it's been way better than I ever thought it all could have gone. From the beginning of the year to now, it has all been a whirlwind and been very fulfilling and awesome. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about coaching, but that has gone, the demand has been way higher than I ever thought it could be. And I went from a thing where I was maybe I'll work 25, 30 hours a week on stream, working Twitch and along with coaching and stuff and other things. And to the point where I just can't really do that and be a human, which is a blessing. I'm definitely thankful for that. But the weirdest part about it, really, somehow weirder than all of that, is how little Magic I got to play. With the move towards doing commentary for NRG, I don't really go and play their events. I commentate them. The SCGs have all been kind of far from me. We're not worked out weekend-wise. And then with the RC system, I just haven't got to play much Magic, honestly. I skipped California because I had just gotten back from everything and just decided to save the money and focus on, jump starting coaching and doing full-time that. I played Atlanta last year, Atlanta this year, and Dallas. I played a couple of the Apex events I drove up to, and that's it. So when I look back on the year, it's a very weird year where my life, in a lot of ways, is more Magic than it's ever been. But when it comes to touching the cards, it's the least amount of Magic I've ever done, which is a really weird situation. So that's kind of my summary in a short form on 2023.
I gotta ask, I guess we can get into it,
Yeah.
but it makes you pretty happy? Like you're in a good spot in Magic?
Yeah, I'm really happy. I mean, like, just like last year, I knew the year was ending and beginning with like a dream coming true. That no matter, for those who don't know, like my once in life is to get into game design, and Magic is obviously something I care a lot about and something I would love to work on, and something where I've done the interview process before, and like I knew that no matter what happens, where my life goes, I will always have an experience where I got to work like in game design for like 2 months, really hands-on, really craft cards, really work the experience. And then no matter what happens in life, I got to help with Magic, which is something that's given me my friends, now my livelihood, and so many amazing memories. So no matter what, I am hopeful that I helped Magic out. And that is very exciting and fulfilling and rewarding and incredibly a heavy burden to wear that I was very excited to take up that weight. And then when it comes to coaching, in my life, I've always sort of felt like I want to help people and I want to help them improve at what they are and learn. And so when I was younger in life, I should say, I really thought about being like a teacher or something like that. Then I kind of learned how much money they make. And I was like, oh, well, like it's kind of rough. It's messed up. Teachers should get paid infinitely more. There is awful. It's the thing I will go to the grave fighting for above like a lot of things. Very few things are higher than that to my mind. And so teachers are underpaid and it's awful. And it's like, well, I don't know. So I just kind of like never really pursued it the way I wanted to. And getting to do coaching full time is something that is like very fulfilling and like helping people understand their hobby more and letting people feel like, oh, wow, I get this thing and this thing I loved. I now understand better. I'm having more fun because I understand it. Even when I lose, I see like where I could be improving and just enriches their experience. And I think giving people their outlet in such stressful, hard times, having more fun with that is very fulfilling for me personally. So I really like that. And then the commentary stuff has been great. We had some unfortunate stuff with NRG this year where like, basically 1.5 events didn't get filmed due to like circumstances outside our control and did everything we could to do it. But I've really liked that. And I'm hopeful to do more commentary stuff in 2024, expanding beyond that. So it's been really great. And, I feel very fulfilled in everything. And I wish I could just play a few more events because I do like playing Magic a lot, especially paper Magic. I don't love playing Magic online the same way I love playing paper, but beggars can't be choosers.
What about you, Abe? How was your 2023? Why don't you give us a breakdown of the world of Abe Stein?
First, I just got to say that, Mason, I feel like either the universe or energy is conspiring against me to get me on coverage with you again. Because both the events you're speaking to, where like we lost 1.5 events, both of them are times we're slated to commentate together, and we're just too powerful to be seen on Twitch. If we do more commentary, it's gonna be game over for a bunch of mid-level commentary teams. That's all I gotta say. Shots fired. Pew pew. Yeah. So 2023 was a really really good year in Magic for me. Let's see. We start from towards the end of 2022. I kind of got the Minecraft map getting back into having time to compete in RCs and like the RCQ level. I'd maybe played like 2 or 3 RCQs for Atlanta, and I had some top 8s and a top 4 and just couldn't convert. And then I was actually able to give it a go in the modern season, and thankfully, spiked there. Got to play San Diego, and was really coming into the year focusing on knuckling down on my process, being like, okay, how am I going to find a way to use my limited time to still come up with playing the best decks possible and having the best plans possible. And thankfully Pioneer made it pretty easy with mono green, and that gave me a lot more room to kind of expand my range beyond Hammer in Modern for the season that came. So I was just, really getting into that and working on that through most of the first half of the year until Dallas, where I, got to qualify for the Pro Tour again after, I guess it was, I did the math on it. I think it was like a 6-year or 7-year absence from the PT to really like hit gold again in that regard. Felt really great to affirm that, like even in a time where I'm giving even less to Magic and more in other aspects of my life out of necessity, and out of like the position I'm in, I'm still able to compete and perform at that level. Was just a really, gratifying and affirming feeling of like, okay, I still like have it. Any doubts I have about where I'm at in Magic or like, where my paths are, it's like, it was really, really good to feel that. But that kind of led to a weird situation where once I had deferred my invite, because I just couldn't make it to Spain on like 6 weeks notice or whatever with a job and like needing to take time off and everything. And then the timing and scheduling of things, meaning the PT, there's no PT4, there's just Worlds. And so like, I still haven't played that Pro Tour I qualified for 6 months ago, like more than 6 months ago to the day now. It just created this 8-month gap where even Atlanta, which I played, the other weekend, is I couldn't qualify for anything there either. I was already qualified for Denver, and I am already qualified for the Pro Tour. So I guess other than the Worlds, which would be like, crazy to win the entire tournament. Outside of that, there's not anything that was on my horizon. So I was really able to continue to do more playing to learn and do more things to expand my range and find the things I'm enjoying in Magic, more than just trying to maximize how much I'm winning in Magic, which I think is like a really, really good thing for my development as a player, and also finding ways to like see the value in that again, as it's some of the stuff that's most tempting to let go of now that I have less time to be preparing for events. Like really, really good to reconnect with that. And still like right now, now I'm still deep in on making sure I have a good grasp on Pioneer and I'm understanding things for the Pro Tour. And, I'm starting to work a little bit on just having my deck set out for Denver. But all of that is stuff where like I feel better about how I'm approaching it now than I would have if it had happened the same time last year. And like a lot of my year was defined by just really getting to love grinding Magic at like the local level again, getting to like go out and play RCQs, and even having like this season, I think I played like 10 or 11 events before I qualified. And like, even in like, I had a bunch of top 8s with Scam, but I like didn't convert, lost a lot of finals matches, qualified in limited, but just got to play a bunch of really, really good Magic with my local scene, get to know some of the players there a little bit better, some of the people who are, trying to make a push and get to that next stage for their game too, and be a part of that journey in terms of seeing them succeed or, playing them in matches that really matter to them and to me. And, all of that is the stuff that I'm really most grateful for out of the year, and probably is like the defining stuff of my year beyond just, obviously like qualifying for the Pro Tour, having a great finish at the RC, having all these like awesome tournaments, getting to like look forward to a Pro Tour as the start of my 2024. But really just the way that I've been able to play Magic and engage with it as much more of a, and connecting with the much more of like, let me play in a way that's something I have fun doing, and trust that a lot of what I have fun doing is understanding the game and trying to like look into and like, piece apart what's happening in the games overall and try to take advantage of that. It's just been a really, really nice thing. And I think that's been like, it's one of my favorite years in Magic for a long time. Even like, and it's easy to say that when you like qualify for a Pro Tour, but like outside of that, I think San Diego was like one of my favorite events I've ever played Magic wise. Even though that format it was a good standard format, but people thought it was kind of stale, or it was like 3 decks. I thought that like all the formats I played and really invest myself in, like I was doing it in a way that was really enjoyable to me. And I just felt like the games kind of flowed and the weekends were great. And that's like, what everyone really wants out of Magic. It's like way better to be, I'm much happier being someone who's like, I just scrubbed out an RC that had a fantastic weekend than someone who's like, yeah, I like cashed, like lost playing my match for the Pro Tour, but all the games sucked, and I was really negative about it. It's just way worse way to live. So I'm really happy with where this year landed me.
Awesome, man. I guess I'm next, and man, 2023. You know, I had a really rough personal year, just due to the state of venture capitalism, and so Magic, in a lot of ways, was, for the first time in a long time, honestly, like an escape for me. Like, usually, you know, you think doing a podcast like this for 10 years, it's become such an ingrained part of my life, but it really was like just getting to jump on to a Discord call with, you know, my best friends and like just bird challenges and stuff like that. That is like one of my favorite ways that I got to engage with Magic this year. And I think that there were a lot of things that I'll get into kind of later in the episode about what 2023 taught me and things, but I think that the biggest thing that happened for me this year is like, one, you know, I took a lot of time off of Magic. Like, I was in the finals of RCQ where I like literally am like calling my wife. I'm like, am I even gonna go to Atlanta? Like it's the week before Christmas, and like, you know, at this time I had a job, so like it was within the realm of possibilities, and just like kind of wondering like what is this year gonna look like for me? You know, and honestly, like I think I really underperformed in San Diego for, you know, a format that I really enjoyed, and there was a lot lacking, and a lot of it has to do with like where my mental was for a lot of the year, and understanding ways to improve that. And kind of the second half of the year, my mental's really improved, and it's really changed, you know, to the point where, you know, my RCQs were a lot better. My you know, my results online were a lot better, and it really was a year of like learning to enjoy this thing and continue to use it as a tool for improving, but also like it's okay to let this game be an escape for you still, Spencer. It's kind of like, I don't know, word vomity, but that is kind of what 2023 was for me. And honestly, I owe a lot of the happiness in the game right now to the folks that I'm getting to coach. And like Mason said, you know, he waxed pretty poetic about it, but just helping others improve and reach their goals and gain a deeper understanding of this thing that's really important to them is really something that I've gotten to enjoy these last couple months. What we learned in 2023. So I'll go first on what I learned. One of the coolest things that I got to learn about in 2023 is kind of how to look at data a little bit better. You know, where to find data. I talked about this in the Discord the other day, but I just think that using data as a tool and different things is really helpful. We've oftentimes talked about the show, like, you know, looking at sideboards. People are like, what does that mean? Why are you looking at sideboards? And I think when you combine the way that like you can win percentage matrix looks with how a typical sideboard looks for a deck, gives you a lot of information about like, okay, so we believe that the matchup is about this, and that the reason that there are these slots and this many of these types of slots turns into a conclusion that you can come to. And I've gotten a lot better at that, to the point where I think my ability to pick up a deck and just sideboard with a list off like online has improved. Where a lot of the times, like, I used to look at a sideboard and be like, okay, well, I need to change some cards because like I think the match for this and I think these are the best cards. Right now I can pick up a deck, try it out, be like, okay, here are what these cards are for, and why they're in the deck a lot easier. Where it used to take me a while. And I think that has been a big learning moment, is just using data to come to conclusions. and also taking it from multiple sources rather than just my own testing and my own beliefs, and everything is a different piece of the buffalo, and you just get to use the whole thing. What about you, Abe?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I learned this year, because I did learn a lot. I think the biggest thing I learned this year, though, was just, and it's something I have always known, which is just the power of when you're really engaged and enjoying what you're doing, it's just easier to do it more and be more successful at it and put your best foot forward. But I really felt that this year in really reconnecting with just how much I love playing competitive Magic and being a part of the scene and everything, just how much more that made it so that I was loving what I was doing. And I don't there was this big time around the RC in Dallas where it was just, and honestly most of the Pioneer format for its entire life, where people are like, oh, the mono green deck is just miserable to play against. And it's just no, I love, I was I fell in love with playing that deck because everyone else was so against it. But I was we all, you need to accept that this is part of the format. Now I'm bringing you that that challenge, and I'm getting to be the boogeyman, and learning to appreciate that, and even just appreciating the times where I didn't do so well, and all of that was really good. And also just learning new ways of approaching understanding a format. I did a lot more exploring the fringes of formats this year than I have in any year past. And that's something I think I'm going to try to continue into next year too, is just spending more time playing things that I think aren't going to be the best thing, or might not get to that level of being the best thing, because you really learn a lot by understanding what of that works. It's isolating down a piece of the problem. So I guess, for example, playing out of blue-black Lutri before the RC, because it was a deck I was maybe considering, it seemed kind of cool, but then understanding oh, okay, so a deck like this, why does this deck work in the matchups it does? And it's okay, this is maybe kind of understand why blue-white's good too. It's because when the half of your deck that's good is good and all the things are effectively the same, you trade off one for one and you pull ahead, you can beat a lot of matchups. But then matchups like red-black, you can't compete with their card for card. But that distilling of it is just more information I have to extrapolate about other things. And that's a way that I learn really well, rather than kind of having to go through playing all of the good decks against each other. Is you can learn a lot more by playing a deck that's in the second tier, to understand what about it makes it even compete in that tier, and what is keeping it from that. And that was something that really just helped me a lot in how I'm going to approach formats in the future too, and especially when I want to get the something that's really helped me over my career is being able to have a strong range, and understand how to play many of the different archetypes within the context of the format. And I think that doing that more is going to continue to enable me to do that as these formats get, modern is entirely different now than it was 3 years ago. By it's completely impossible to recognize format. It's unrecognizable compared to where it was.
I think that they're two key. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh no, I was basically done. But it's those things keep on happening. The formats keep on changing, and I can't be relying on the same priors that I used, from 2016 to 2019 or whatever. All of those things I learned, I'm going to have to keep on relearning and re-evolving. And this is a great way I've found to continue to get that deeper knowledge that I had through how much time I was playing before, by focusing less on the best decks and more on the up and comers or the flashes in the pan, to kind of understand what it's saying about a moment. That's all.
I just want to say I think there are two key points to what you just said. One is you are playing you're playing things a little bit out of what was your comfort zone, right? And something that I often see players do when they do that is they'll go adjust the sideboard so that they can sideboard in. Let's say that you're a player that loves control decks, and you pick up a mid-range deck, and then every time you sideboard, you just sideboard into a control deck. Like, you're not expanding your range in those situations. What you're really doing is, like, you know, just relying on your heuristics and your skills from another area and applying them here, and you didn't really learn anything. And the other thing is, if you're going to do this and you're going to actually do it right, you have to be okay with losing. Like, you have to learn to be like, in order to learn this, I'm going to lose sometimes. You know, playing a worse deck, right, quote unquote, leads is going to do that. Like, your win percentage is going to drop, and you need to be okay with that at the expense of your win percentage and your feelings as you're doing these things. Because, like, it's hard to, like, test matches of Magic or play a deck without, like, feeling some sort of pride in those games. And I don't know, I really like that, and I think that those, if you take anything away from what Abe just said, that's what I got out of it anyway.
Yeah, and I think it's like, it's something that I'm able to do because, like, I think the starting line of it is where I think you're really getting to in terms of, like, what you were saying just now about picking up a deck and being able to just sideboard how it feels like the deck creator intended. Is like, when I'm playing a lot of these decks, I'm putting a lot of trust in myself to vet my sources when I'm, like, looking at, like, 5-0 deck list dumps or prelims, be like, okay, I know this player would play something that makes sense and has plans. Let me try to read the language of the deck list and understand how it's supposed to function in these matchups based on how I'm understanding they're going to work and what looks important when I look at it on paper. Like, I'm still doing a lot of that work to understand it, but through that process, I feel like I'm understanding a lot better, and have been able to understand a lot better what makes these things tick from the people who really understand it, right? Like, for me, working with Hammer was a big level up in this for me, was reading, like, disgruntled elk deck lists and Crusher bot deck lists, and like, you know, seeing what Will Kruger was doing with the archetype and, like, what the top players are doing, and then being like, okay, what is the synthesized idea here? That, like, how is it that they're constructing their list, and what are those play patterns going to look like, and what's their idea of the matchup? They're saying a lot. Like, they're saying more than you could ever write in an article with how they're constructing their deck. These players who are really thoughtful and play it week in, week out, and learning to understand what that's saying on multiple different, like, not just archetypes where I played it a ton and now I'm trying to understand what they're saying on a deeper level, but picking up a deck in Standard, in Pioneer, that's like, or like picking up an Aspiring Spike deck list and being like, okay, well, what's the core of what he's trying to do here, and then seeing if I can make it, you know, better or work differently. Once you can start looking at a deck list like that, which I think is what you were speaking to, getting to, like, more and then getting better at this year, Spencer, like, that is so central to being able to kind of have the process I have right now. And it's a really, really great skill that I have. So definitely want to work on.
Mason, what about you, man?
Yeah, you know, thinking back on this question earlier and sort of running prepared this morning, I was thinking about, like, what am I going to talk about? It's weird where, like I talked about, a lot of my Magic this year is totally different than it's been in the past. And I think my biggest learning moment actually really ties into, like, game design and coaching and commentary, where there's a lot of assumed things about players. And there's some amount of things that we just have to assume, right? We can't stop and explain every little thing every little time. It just isn't functional. At some point, people have to jump into the deep end. But one thing that I think is important that I really learned this year is that, like, sometimes an archetype or a thing hasn't been around in a while, and there are players who have joined in over the last couple of years and they have no experience. And I think and they have no experience and no frame of reference on it. And sometimes you need to, like, you can't shortcut that stuff with them in the way you could with maybe something like a mid-range deck, right? So if I'm talking to Abe or whatever, and I say, yeah, this deck is very much like Abzan aggro. I know that, and like Sim Dispenser, like, y'all will know what that means in, like, a shorthand, right? But that's not something that, like, maybe the other people would know. But they might know, like, Rakdos mid-range from Pioneer as, like, an aggressively slanted mid-range deck that can play different roles. And so that came up, but it really came up with the Amalia deck, where when working with a bunch of people that I was coaching for the RC, when I picked up the Amalia deck and, like, actually started playing it after taking a second look at it and trying to, double check my work, play these more tuned versions of the deck, it was like, oh, this deck is, like, a creature combo deck that can, like, basically threaten a combo out of nowhere and, like, creates these weird play patterns for your opponent, and you don't want to always be attacking. Sometimes you want to hold up creatures for cord, even though you could get an attack in for a little bit. And it just plays the game way differently, where, I was talking to someone who I was coaching, who I've coached for a long time. Their name's Robin, and she was having issues, and I like shorthanded to splinter twin them here, where she was like actually playing a game. And it occurred to me that she didn't know what I meant. And what I meant is we're just going to apply a little bit of pressure, hold up this quarter calling, and the moment they tap out, we're going to kill them. And we're just going to send with our one little creature so we can keep up the core and slowly develop. And we're both going to be in this kind of like stuck position. And I think the biggest learning moment for me was like, there's a lot of things that we are shorthanding and distilling, and we've learned in the past, but haven't been as big a part of Magic over the last 2 or 3 years, that are coming back in some ways. And I really want to figure out a way to help people understand that stuff and figure out an easy, teachable way for that. So my biggest learning moment is Magic is a game that's constantly evolving. And to what Abe said, Modern's so different 3 years ago to now that it's, not even the same format in a lot of ways. They're just totally different. And that is very true. And I think that Magic in general is very different. I think a lot of people think about Magic like in 2012 to 2015, 16 era. And that is not the game we're playing. Magic is a different game. And I can often tell this when people say stuff like,
did you look at my
3-mana, 3/3 that gives value.
Did you look at my state champion play? That's what you picked those 2 years? This is literally 2012 and 20. Dang, boomer.
There's just a lot of players. I like hate to say it, but like that era of Magic is gone. I was talking to Marion about this after one of the Apexes, and he was like talking about a creature, and I was like, dude, that's just how creatures are now. Like, we are not playing the same game that we were a decade ago. And that in some ways is good, in some ways bad. But it's like the game is very different, and you need to think about the game differently. And if you hold on to these archaic way of looking at things, you're going to fall behind. So you need to recontextualize and relearn. So that was a lot of thoughts. I'm not even sure if I did a good job conveying my thoughts there. I feel like I didn't nail it. But that's the big thing that what I learned is that, and I really want to figure out ways to help people from there. Because that's something I've really learned a lot over the last, I would say, 2 or 3 months, and was sprinkled throughout all my time from like, working on MH3, where it's like, oh, like casual players don't really know that. And it's like, oh, that's a great point. I didn't think about it from their perspective. And like, oh, this and that. And like, okay. And then like, I move and I go into coaching, and someone's like, I don't understand like why you would play Esper Legends, because it's like a mid-range deck, but like you can't go big. And it's like, oh wait, no. It's like a super aggressively slanted mid-range deck that like its power, its curve, And they're just things like that like stick out of my mind over and over again, where I've learned these lessons. And I think as a community, a lot of us have learned them and we shorthand them. But there is this new crop of players, like the COVID babies, basically, that all came up during COVID, and they played Magic Online or with a partner or a friend they were able to connect with, and they're really starting to compete now, and they don't have that wealth of experience. And going back and watching old coverage of reading these old articles isn't going to help them, because they don't have the context for a lot of them, because a lot of them are written in the context of that era. And so they try to read these things, and they're like, I don't know, and then they kind of bounce off them. So I want to help fix that. That is something that I've learned this year, and I really want to work on. Because honestly, to like keep it a buck, I don't think I've improved that much at the game of Magic this year. I think I'm a little bit better than I was 365 days ago, but that wasn't my goal in a lot of ways this year. In a lot of ways, it was like staying sharp, staying on top of things, and working on like game design stuff, working on commentary stuff, and working on coaching stuff, so I could help other people. So I didn't get to push myself maybe as much as I wanted to. I don't think I've like digressed a bunch or anything, but I just don't think that like that wasn't where my head was at for the last 12 months.
Let's talk about improving. We didn't do the always improving at the beginning of the show because we wanted to take a bigger picture of like the whole year. Abe, why don't you talk to me about your biggest always improving of 2023?
Yeah, I think my biggest always improving in 2023, actually I know it's this, is that I've gotten so much better at doing more with less time, or even just doing the same as I was doing before with less time. On our episode about setting goals, so like the last episode of the year, last year / first episode this year, like my goal was to get to a point where I felt like my process was good enough for me to have a shot at the Pro Tour and get on the Pro Tour at all of the RCs. And like, in spite of the fact that now I have less that I'm working with, and even now I'm working, in a smaller group than I was before, and like in different circles than I was, this time last year. And still, I feel really, I feel pretty good about where my process is, and that I'm still able to compete at the level I want to, and feel as prepared as I would like to for a lot of the events I play week in, week out. In spite of the fact that I'm maybe giving Magic like half as much time as I did before the pandemic, maybe even less than half, maybe like a quarter or like a tenth some weeks. And that's been like a real big change in my process to include, oddly enough, more playing than I was doing before, and less, still a lot of studying, but still like less studying than I was doing before, to make sure I'm maximizing where I'm putting my hours in both of those. But like really reshaping my process and what it looks like and where I'm allocating my hours to see the same kind of output in terms of my results, and in terms of, my ability to, help bounce ideas off of people who are doing, either more play or less play than me, more theory and stuff like that, to kind of build a network of balancing my reality I'm experiencing off of them, and getting more feedback that way, and opening it up a bit to having to do a little bit more filtering of what I'm learning from people I'm talking to, but just overall having that process kind of feel like it's finally falling into place, feeling good about what I'm doing for each format in terms of like the week to week, and also just being able to still, like, this weekend in Atlanta was a bit of an exception because of just how tight the timetable was and what time of year it is and everything going on in my life, that I felt still a little bit unprepared for that event. But I think that just about everyone felt pretty unprepared for that event in terms of what could happen. And it was just, I was keeping up with everyone else in terms of, the feelings on the format and what to be playing and how to even approach all these new problems all at once. And it's something that, if you asked me a year ago, I would definitely tell you I was anxious about, and I wasn't like certain I'd be able to do. But it's been a great help to have done that, and it's definitely a big improvement over where I was last year. And I'm looking forward to making that an even more refined and even better process, and getting more used to it, and solving some things for myself, like supply chain issues, like, oh, I need to source all of these cards still. I forgot that's a whole, like, that used to be a full 2 days of any tournament prep. I was like going to an open, being like, okay, I've changed decks in the last 3 days. Now I need to get every copy of all the cards I need and the extras I might flex to, all before my flight. And now it's like, well, I can't. I'm working for 2 8-hour days before that. I can't just do that. So there's room to improve there too, but just having a whole process from start to finish that allows that has been really great.
I always say it's best to be process-oriented, results-driven. I
say that all the time at work now. It's by far my biggest Spencer quote. I just take it with me everywhere.
that I could improve your workplace.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mason, what about you, man? I mean, you kind of talked about this, like it was a little bit different, but
yeah, I think the biggest, maybe always improving moment. And I think I talked a little bit about this last year, and I think it is slightly different. So something about just trusting myself to understand what the game plans are, and to play the games a little differently, and understand that I can and will orchestrate the games to make these cards matter. And there's two things that really jump out to me. One is small and one is big when it comes to this. The small one is putting Godfair statue in the mono green sideboarding. That was a card that left a lot of people sideboard their wish plans, and people would have Might Stone, Weak Stone as an answer to Shieldred and stuff. And I really sort of believe that hey, a large percentage of games, 10-15% somewhere in there, your opponents are going to mulligan, and you're just going to have your slam a Godfair statue and they fall behind, and Phoenix started to pick back up near the end. And so that was something where it's hey, I know everyone else isn't doing this. I know Bobby isn't doing this. I know they have reasons, but I just don't believe them, and it's like, just because everyone's saying something, I wasn't convinced by their reasons. And I was convinced that like I'm willing to basically have a dead sideboard slot and a fair percentage of matchups, because some reasonable percentage of the time I just get to slam this card that ends the game or creates all these weird things for my opponent. So adding more dimensions to my deck and giving up stuff and like that cost benefit analysis, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. That's like my biggest always improving moment, is understanding that more and becoming more at peace with like, I'm doing something that maybe looks dumb, but I believe it to be reasonable at worst, and this is what it is. And it's very much like an evolution of Reasonable Deck Gamer, where Reasonable Deck Gamer, in some ways, you could argue, and I've often thought this, that it's almost like Don't Get Bullied Gamer, where it's like, because when I describe it to you, right, it's like, hey, I'm going to go up to Abe and Sukinnick, and they're going to be like, oh, that deck's reasonable or whatever, Another way to look at that is, oh, you're not going to get made fun of, right? Like, you're not doing anything risky. And so I think to my Apex Gaming Invitational 4-color deck, where I played no ring and I played expressive iteration and I played, 60 cards, and I had a lot of 3s and 2s and 4s and 1s, and I had a lot of really good plans. And ultimately, I feel really happy with that deck. There were, 2 matchups that I decided to basically give up because I didn't expect them to be super popular with how I thought the metagame was going to go. The metagame did go the way I thought it was going to go. I ended up just playing those decks in my 2 win ends and lost. And that's okay. Like, I feel like if I play that tournament 100 times, I top 8 more than my fair share of the times. I feel really good about that deck. I feel really proud of it. And one of my losses was to someone I've coached who worked really hard, but they also rode up with me. And we played a bunch the night before. And it was a thing where they learned in real time kind of why my deck was different than normal and how to adapt to it. And those is like, basically, we talked about, she made a couple decisions pretty differently because of those games. And building my deck to structure the games differently than how normal 4-color was at the time, and basically being like, yeah, my deck is really actually strong against cards like Bowmaster and Shieldred. It is not weak to them like normal ones are. Like, see how this is totally different. And building my deck in a way to exploit that and to be building a bunch of cards people just don't play, I think really opened me up. And doing things like main decking Spell Pierces and like pretty high numbers was something, and going to like really low numbers to Fairy 3 are things that I normally wouldn't do because those cards are just so strong and so ubiquitous. But I took a shot and understood like I could build and can like mold my deck in such a way, and ended up not working out. But like, I still had a good finish. I finished like top 16 of the event. I think I played well in my games for the most part. I learned a real weird rules interaction, which was like a good learning moment for me. But at the end of the day, I really feel like I got a better understanding of like being a reasonable deck gamer, but taking risks with that at the same time, if that makes sense. So I think that was my biggest always improving moment over the course of the year with the little tournaments I did play. And I think actually most of my tournaments outside of Amalia here at the RC, you could actually argue I did this for all of them now that I'm thinking about it, in a way that didn't really contextualize in my head until just now. Even my Amalia deck had stuff in main deck that a lot of people didn't believe in, like Skews, but I knew like Skews would be really big in the mirror, and I played a bunch of mirrors, and like the Skews mattered a lot in these game ones where I had this and they didn't. The normal play pattern of thin your deck, return the rings back, Dyna just doesn't work if I Skews you. So it was a really interesting.
I gotta ask: does the rules interaction have to do with Indomitable Creativity? Is that what you were mentioning?
No.
Oh, okay. It's like, I don't know that I'd call that a rules interaction.
I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm talking about Cultivator Colossus. I thought if you Boseju'd a land, there was a moment where the land wasn't in play and the search trigger was on the stack. So and there's actually an Apex that you can watch. I basically attack with a Fury, and then I ping this Cultivator Colossus when they have 8 lands. So they block the Fury with their 8/8. They're like, block. And then I go ping. I think they thought I had like another Wrenn and 6 or whatever. I didn't. I had a Boseiju. And I thought the way it worked is it like would kill it. And I, for some reason, thought it put a trigger on the stack and let them search. And with that trigger on the stack, there'd be 7 lands in play. The Cultivator Colossus would die. But it doesn't. It all happens at once, which I probably did know if I had like an hour to think about it. But in my brain, I kind of shortcutted to what his moto looked like, and I got it wrong.
Sure.
And I should have just asked a judge, which is a whole nother always improving moment. But it was also a moment where it's like, I feel like if I ask the judge, this person's going to figure out there's something weird with this attack. And if I hit them for 6 with the Fury, I don't think I'll actually even win the game. Sure. Like, I think they should actually just no block, because if I did have the second Ren line, it's actually really bad for them. And I was playing like I think a Bolt that weekend too. So, anyways, that was my weird rules interaction that came up during this. That's all.
I do like that you're always improving for the year. Was I started taking deck lists that were nice plates of spaghetti and sprinkling a little Parmesan on them.
It all circles back.
The year of the Parmesan.
I took some big risks this year, I think, relative to what I normally do when it comes to deck selection. And I feel like I was mostly paid off for it. You know, I just didn't get to play as much as I normally want to. So
Nat said something to me about Parmesan yesterday. I don't remember what it was, but it made me giggle.
Like the theory with the food.
The theory. We were talking. We were talking about something, and he's like, "Yeah, it's Parmesan something," and I was like, "This is too funny." Yeah. So
little cheese.
It's the Donkey Kong. Speaking of Donkey Kong, my always improving moment is really interesting, and it will feed into our next episode where we talk about goals quite a bit. But this gave me my always. For those not listening and not watching, I'm holding a GameCube controller. And this gave me my biggest always improving in Magic this year. So I talked about my mental health this year and how it was rough. And one of the things that I've always struggled with, basically, not always, but like the last few years, is ladder anxiety and honestly just like online play anxiety. Just like the getting from the point where I have a deck list I want to try to actually like sitting down and doing it is really, really hard for me. And the losses feel so, like I talked about that earlier too, like the losses feel so much in like my chest, and I get really bad anxiety. It feels like my chest is twisting and all this stuff. And I was playing Smash Bros, and they have an online ladder system too. And one of the characters that I played, Hyrule, was like 2 games or so away from their level of Mythic called Elite Smash. And I was like, I just am going to do it. I just decided one day when I woke up I was going to do it. And then I did it. I just like woke up, went like 4 and 5 or something or whatever was needed for it, and did it. And it was one of those moments where I thought about applying it to Magic, and since then have applied it to Magic, where I'm able to just pull the trigger on things now. And getting over something like, I'm just going to keep using the term ladder anxiety, even though I think it's a little bit broader than that. It's really hard, and I know a lot of people suffer with it. I know a lot of people that will basically only talk about Magic and then go to their, stay in their comfort zone, only go to F&M, and not leave that space because they have this anxiety about doing things in other ways, doing things differently. They're afraid of those losses. They're afraid of those changes. And for me, the way to get over it was to look at it like holistically. One of the things that had happened the day before in the case of Smash is I just was like looking at my win percentage with this character over my last 50 games, and I was like, if I literally just play, it will just happen. Like that's just how it's going to work. And when in coaching, I've talked to people about our SKUs, and they're like, I'm top 8ing all these events and stuff. And one of the things that I talk about is like, why is that top 8 match, that quarterfinals match, or that finals match, why is that different to you? Like, what's actually happening in your brain that makes it different for you? Because at the end of the day, right, if your win percentage stays at its current rate throughout however many RCQs, you're going to win one. Like, it will just happen. And you have to accept that and then treat it like you did round 1 and round 2 and round 3. So, but being able to do that online for me was really hard.
I think there's something that, and if I'm misunderstanding or misconstruing what you're saying, please feel free to correct me. There's something that I think really helped me that I've only recently verbalized of like what helped me develop such a strong mental game in terms of my ability to play long events and like not really care about You know, I lose round, some of my best finishes, I just lost round one.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like there's an acceptance, especially when it's like, and I've never really understood like test anxiety, ladder anxiety, like things where it's like, oh, the fact that there is a final like evaluation of what I did, or like this is going to affect my positioning in like real time, never gets to me. And it's because Magic is a game where you win and you lose. And I think I see a lot of players who really, really love when they win, and they want to play Magic as a game where they win. I think for me, understanding, especially like more so now, having Magic as a game where I win and I lose, and I learn from and I appreciate both sides of those games, makes it a lot easier to engage in positions where, like, sure, like, yeah, I think I might lose, or like I think, like, sure, I might be winning. Like, I'm playing like Blue Black Lutri through leagues on Magic Online. I'm like, do I think I'm really gonna 5-0 a bunch of leagues with Lutri and like have a great time and like just win all my matches? Like, no, I'm probably gonna have to work really, really hard to eke out some wins where I get pretty lucky. But I think there's something to this deck, and maybe I'm wrong, or I think I might learn something. Or like same thing with playing. You know, when I first started playing Hammer, I was like, do I really think this Hammer Time deck is all that it, like, before I even had Esper Sentinel? Like, is this all like there? It's like, no, but you know, I'm gonna learn a lot from losing. And I think that when you love the idea, even when you're playing something where it's like, okay, it's ladder, I'm going to lose position, I'm going to fall and slide back. But the fact of the matter is that can happen when you're playing to win and when you're playing to lose. And as long as you're appreciating both, I think that's something that really, you know, I wanted to share on the show, because it's something I really learned to verbalize like pretty recently. But understanding and accepting that it's a game where you win and you lose makes it so much more enjoyable and easy to engage with in all types of ways. Like, even when you're playing a tournament, if you're understanding, you come in, it's like, yeah, I could just lose every round I play today and still play my best, and that's just what happened. You know, that can happen on ladder, that can happen to your RCQ, but it's, you know, it's what you go out there, and that makes you appreciate the times you win so much more, when you know that, like, yeah, your 60% or 70% win rate in paper or whatever, which is really, really high at a local level, like, the 30% there is what makes the 70% so impressive.
Yeah,
so I wanted to share that perspective.
It's so funny because, like, I don't have this problem going into like a paper event. There's just something really weird about online that hurts my chest, and I think that's like a lack of a person on the other side, like, to like in my brain, even though that there is one. But Mason, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, and this is, maybe feel free to edit this out if you don't want to have this on the show. Do you feel like, because you said ladder anxiety almost isn't the right word, because you feel like it's more than that, right? I almost feel like when I was listening to you talk, it sounds like almost a fear of failure and being judged by someone you don't know. You know what I mean? Like, on the other side of the table, like on the other side of the world, they're like idiot or whatever when you like get down smashed, you know, or like in Magic, it's like they played into my thing, idiot, you know, right? Like that kind of thing. I wonder if that's part of it, just from like, you know.
I actually think that it's the reverse. Like, in my head, like, there's not like another person on the other side, and all of the anxiety is inward, and like me feeling like myself is an idiot. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, so it's like you judging yourself. Yeah, your self-talk is bad.
Yeah, and you know, I talk about that a lot. You know, having, you know, working on self-talk, and like, it is really, really important, especially in a game where like Abe says that you are gonna lose, that you are gonna make mistakes. And I think the reason that it was my biggest always improving is, like, I've done a really good job in paper Magic of doing this, where I don't have these same bad habits in paper, but I have to, and we'll get into this in the next episode, like, having to apply them to online play is really important.
Yeah. If you're a listener, by the way, and you're struggling with this too, I really think a big thing is, like, talk to yourself like you would talk to others. Yeah. Like, and that's much easier said than done. I'm not just saying I've wiped away your problems, you know, like Mr. Miyagi or whatever. But I do think that's like a really big first step, once you also kind of accept like what Spencer is talking about here, and like just doing, just like, if you think you're talking to yourself in a way that you would be like, wow, that person's a meanie or whatever, or something like that to someone else, then you need to like evaluate, like, wait, why am I treating myself this way?
Also, I think that, like, you know, not to get lost in the sauce, but the first step is taking the first step, right? Like, literally loading up a league on Magic Online even though it might, dude, it's so funny. I literally have chest pains right now talking about this. Like, even though it might feel like, oh, like I can't do it, like I can't do it, like you can do it. And the only way to get over these type of things is to, I mean, maybe not the only way, but I think one of the best ways is to confront them. Like, you know, I can speak to what it did for me in Smash and how I'm going to apply it now to Magic. Is that all of my characters are out of the dumpster GSP now in Smash. Like, I don't have a character that's like in the dumpster anymore, and you know, I can just go load up a character that I'm not very good with, that is my favorite character to play in Greninja, and not feel anything other than I get to play Greninja, my favorite character, and I know I'm gonna lose some, but like, you know, whatever. And like next, like I plan on hitting Elite here the next little while with Wolf, and like all of these things, people are like, what is he talking about? But you know, it is. I definitely cured myself of it in a game that I care about a lot, and I'm going to apply the things that I'm doing to Magic, and I have in some ways. Like, I'm really able to like jump into events on Arena and jump into Ladder and have no hard feelings in either of those at all right now. And now the next step is kind of Magic Online. So let's talk about our favorite formats. Let's round this thing out with some format talk. Mason, what was your favorite format this year and why?
Modern Horizons 3 FFL. I can tell you what now. Unironically, that was the most fun Magic I played this year. I struggle with this a lot because, like, Modern was my favorite format by like a lot. I find Pioneer, like, my win rate in Pioneer is like very high or whatever, but like, it's fine. And like I like we talked about the show, right? Like, I really don't like the I have to enjoy something to do well with it mindset. Like, it is like that is a real thing. Like, people don't feel engaged, they don't try. But I do think, like what Abe said, like, well, I like learned to love these things about green. I feel like I kind of did that with Pioneer a lot. I kind of like ate my vegetables. So, you know, I don't know. I think Pioneer is a really awesome FNM format. And like, I went and played FNM at my LGS yesterday, and I played my Yorion Amalia deck, and it was sweet. And I had a great time. And, you know, it was super fun. And I played cool games versus a bunch of Rakdos decks, and it was a fun time or whatever. But like, Modern is so much more deep and has so much more interactions, and I really like that. And, you know, I think my favorite one was really getting to explore a brand new format. Like, it's like when a standard set releases, week one standard is often typically really fun. Having a Horizon set release and being like, work on this was the most fun. So Modern is my answer, but like, I understand that my experience with Modern this year is very different than the average person's. Also because like, I played like one RCQ and was finished in all the seasons or whatever. So I played like not much against Scam, and I didn't play many Modern tournaments. So like, I understand that maybe I'm in the minority for like 9 reasons.
It's so weird. Modern Horizons 3 Modern was my favorite format. No, I'm just kidding.
It's gonna be because Mason worked on it.
I made a joke to Quentin about it the other day, because he was talking about how much he didn't like Lord of the Rings. I was like, well, don't worry, man. Mason fixes all the problems next year.
I made City in a Bottle, but for Mordor.
This was it was funny when I was already writing the show notes. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to answer this, because like, there were a lot of good Magic formats this year. Like, I know that a lot of people had a problem with like the Ring and Orcus Bowmasters and stuff, but I did actually think that I don't think that there was a quote unquote bad Modern format this year, and that's impressive. Like, I think that like Scam was overrepresented, and like, I think that Grief is on the short list of still getting banned, but I don't know. I really enjoyed Modern. I really enjoyed it before Lord of the Rings. My favorite deck being the best deck is always fun. Standard, went through some iterations this year that I think were good. I'm really glad that like it's funny because like I think the formats were good, and then I still am happy with the bannings that happen pretty often. So like for example, I'm really glad Invoke Despair is not in standard. I think that card, like as awesome as that standard format was, and I think Abe, you enjoyed it a lot too. Invoke Despair is just like miserable in the format, like making planeswalkers look like jokes and making all the games like it just made the games weird.
It crowded out a lot of things.
Yeah, it was just awkward. But like the format was fun, and I think that we've gotten to the point, and I think that this, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you two know more about this, but like that is kind of the point of Magic design right now, is to make the games fun. And I do think that they have achieved that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna jump in and say my favorite format I played this year was actually just standard for the RC in San Diego. That was, and I've said this a lot, that was probably the most fun I've had playing the Magic, like round to round, in that RC. Out of like, it's like easily top 5 out of tournaments I've ever played in terms of like just how much I enjoyed playing my deck, how much I enjoyed like, especially in open deck lists for that one, like because there was so many small variations that could be made in how you were constructing your 75 for a lot of the archetypes. Playing the game of knowing what it is they're going to do and adjusting was just really cool and really fun. And the gameplay was also pretty good. I do think that, like, I'm glad that the changes to the format that happened did happen, especially as we're sitting here with, like, it would have been, what, more Fables and Invoke Despairs and Bankbusters for another year with them expanding standard size. But, yeah, I think they did, and it was a format where, like, I even remember being at the RC and saying, like, I hope this is an event where everyone who played it and like really tried and like, you know, gave it their all to figure out like a list and like, you know, try to succeed here, comes out of it with like an excitement about playing standard again in the future, because I think they really nailed it in terms of like you're saying, Invoke Despair is really, really strong and like kind of makes it so you can't play like a top end of expensive planeswalkers, which is like what a lot of people like to do, and like you kind of have to play like Fabled Mirrorpicker is so good because it mitigates Invoke Despair on both ends, and also like it's an enchantment and a creature,
yeah,
and also helps you like find the things you need. It's just like so strong in the context of things, and some of that was like kind of unfortunate, but overall, like when you actually sat down and were playing the games, they were really, really engaging and fun, and there was a lot of like, even within like just the pillars of like, okay, you're playing a red-black or maybe red-black X mid-range deck, like there was a large spectrum of how you could approach like the games, from either being like a more controlling counterspell-based Grixis deck with like Corpse Appraisers to being like a more lean red-black deck or something in the middle. You know, Esper Legends could go on the range from being like a more low-to-the-ground aggressive build to kind of going a bit taller and higher in terms of like playing Lilianas, which was like the best thing for them that weekend. And then being a little bit more controlling, you could like play this really, really inevitability-based mono-white deck, or even play that style of deck, but then make it still pretty low to the ground and play more like creature-based threats that are evasive to the removal in the format. And there's a lot of variety across the like there was maybe 2 or 3 color-wise archetypes you were playing, but across those, the variety and depth of the gameplay was really good. And I really look forward to what Standard's going to look like in the coming years, especially as we have RC seasons. And once we get past this kind of growing pains year of, well, these cards weren't designed to be in the same environment as those cards, so there's like some unintended overlap and things are a little weird. But once we get past that and into like the next year and the next year of Standard, where they're designing for it to be a 3-year format, I'm really, really excited, because I think they've been doing, it's really frustrating when I hear people complain about play design, and this is just a little aside, when primarily the formats people play are ones that they do not design for. They design actively for standard and for limited. If you do not booster draft the set that comes out and you do not play standard, then you really don't have much of an opinion on what it is they do at their job for like 90% of their day.
I love that.
But when you look at the things they do for that 90%, they're some of the most fun things coming out right now. And some, like, when you really dig down into it, and everyone collectively did for that standard season, which has not happened since and had not happened in a long time up until then, everyone engaging in the format, like a large like mass of competitive players all playing it, it was a lot of fun. Yeah. And everyone that I talked to about it was like, before Atlanta, I was talking with my friend Joel, who we had like played very similar 75s of Red Black at San Diego, and we're both kind of like lost as to what to do for Atlanta. And he was like, I wonder if they'll just let us all play the same decks we registered at San Diego. Like, can we all just handshake and be like, all right, we're playing standard circa like, you know, spring this year? Because it was just that good. It was just that fun. So yeah, that's my feelings on all of it.
Yeah, I feel like a thing, and this is like a me thing, I believe that like having lots of room for interchangeable pieces is a lot of fun. Because if you think of like the three main player demographics, there's Timmy Tammies who really want to have an experience, and for them having different toys that do similar things is a pretty cool experience. For Johnny Jennies, who are like brewers, having different options creates new doors, even when they're similar, because they overlap in different unique ways. And then for Spikes, it creates like this moment to metagaming at an edge. And I think on average, players actually, there's a large number of players, even spiky players, who don't love playing like what everyone else is playing. They want to have a little spice. So having like lots of cards that compete at the same mana value and do similar yet different things, I think really opens the door and does what Abe's talking about. Or like, you know, there was like various builds of Esper, and there are right now, you know, and there's like various kill spells and various ways to build your white deck and your blue deck and your black deck. And like, that is really cool. Like even in standard right now, you know, the mono blue tempo deck looks pretty similar, but like there's a lot of different blue counter spells for a creature you can play. Like Essence Scatter works with your Hottie Chip. The new one, I think Deep Chill, is also a cancel for 4 mana for anything else. So like, oh, it's 2 mana for counter a creature, 4 mana for anything. That's an interesting decision point. Is that worth the 1 mana on my Essence Scatter? Or should I play Essence Capture? Which I ended up personally playing a split of last year because I wanted to have, you know, my like Hottie Gens be bigger in the mirror, and like my Ledger Shredders and my Delvers get a little bigger. And so like there was like a lot of in my the Djinn thingy, the dinosaur. So like there's a lot of different things where it's like, oh, there are reasons to do these different things. This is a really cool experiment. And you know, to circle back to Spencer's point, you know, like it's been really fun. I think, yeah, like having options is fun. Like when as a game designer, Mason really hates when you make something that is the best of something. Like Ragavan is the best red creature, and it is really hard to make a creature better than Ragavan without really pushing it. So there's no room above Ragavan. I think a cool thing about standard is there's a lot of room for the cards to like basically be the same, or like slightly, maybe this one's like 0.1% better. And there's like a lot of reasons for it to be different, and there's a lot of room to design cards around and above and below these cards. And the power level being lower, I think helps that. And so I think standard is really great. I wish I could have got to engage with that format more. I'm excited to engage with this new format. I bought my first standard deck for the RCQ seasons. I'm very excited. And my last little thing I'll say is that they design so far in advance that like it is hard. And I think we will start seeing stuff like Pioneer get thought about more, but like it's just tough. And I really agree with what Abe said. It's like people go like, wow, Wizards doing such a bad job. And it's like they're eating at a different restaurant, you know? It's like, God, this McDonald's sucks, and they're in a Burger King. And they're just like, my McFlurry like doesn't taste good at all.
This Taco Bell is terrible.
Take the bite of the Big Mac. Right? It's just like you're not playing. It's just not the thing. So
my answer is Pioneer. By
I
the
get
way.
worked up about it.
Yes, I think Pioneer was my favorite format this year. Mostly because like green decks were good. No.
A lot of Lana Realms.
Yeah, I love
that's the most surprising thing of the RC. I don't think we talked about that enough last week, Abe. Lana Elf's not coming out the way I thought it would, even like in the Amalia world. So,
well, I mean, just a quick 3 seconds on that. You do realize that every card in the Amalia deck is Lana Elves, and the only spells you have any difficulty casting have Convoke, and the same thing in Boros Convoke too. So there's actually a lot of Flamorels.
I agree that the free spells and the things that reduce the spell costs are still the best things in Pioneer. I'm just saying I got these
They just
cool
make your
Elvish Mystics
entire-
with an old border, and they banned my deck, and I want to play with my cool old border. All right, we're moving.
right.
Patty B asks,
Yeah, let's wrap it.
Patreon question. We're just going to pitch this one to Mason alone. Mason, Patty B asks, how do you determine metagame for large tournaments like the RC? For example, on the last episode, Mason expected X and Y percentage. I'm curious how that calculation works.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is one, realistic expectations of what players will play. So sometimes you listen to people talk and they say stuff like, yeah, the whole room's going to be Rakdos. And then you ask them, what does that mean? And they say like 20%, which is notably not even half the room. So sometimes players say something that would mean another. Personally, I think a lot about like how strong does a deck seem to be perceived and how strong I think it actually is, and kind of average in the middle there. And a lot of this is about getting rough guesstimates. So I can like recount a bit of this for the RC for you. I thought Phoenix was the clear deck that was one of the strongest and the most well-tuned and just needed to change up its interaction. So I thought Phoenix, I have it somewhere, maybe pull up my computer, but I thought Phoenix would be between 10 and 12%. And I figured it would be underrepresented because it was such an obvious choice and you can attack Phoenix, and Phoenix has shown historically it struggles being attacked. Rakdos, I thought, would be anywhere from about 15 to 20%, really depending on what you call like anti-Rakdos versus like traditional Rakdos, because it is typically the most played and popular deck. It is quite good. And a lot of people, I think, incorrectly assess that their traditional Rakdos deck would be very good against the Amalia deck. And as that kind of like popped up, along with like Convoke. Like for some reason, Shieldred Rakdos players think they're good against Convoke, which is just like, what? But anyways, that's a different conversation. So I'm not going to go through all of it, but that's the kind of the process, right? Where I'm thinking about what are people doing and sort of how they show up, right? And I look at like past data, and I understand that like people can't change decks wholeheartedly, and it's just really hard to move. And so if your deck is still pretty good, people are going to kind of, some percentage are going to lean towards that. So I don't think the numbers are going to move dramatically unless something happens in the metagame that really changes it and there's time to adjust. So for example, the Amalia deck happened a week before. It's really hard to adjust whole decks. It's really easy to change sideboard and flex lock cards. And what we saw is that, you know, like Blue Eye Control had a similar representation than what's happened the last couple of RCs. It just performed better because its position was better and like the deck has changed. But like, I'm curious, like what a RC would have looked like if it was 2 weeks from now, but we had like a Grand Prix, per what Abe said last week, we had a Grand Prix style event. How would things change? So when I'm doing this, I'm really thinking about like, what do I think is good? What do I think players will bring? And sort of coming to a rough estimate and thinking about, okay, you know, I had this information. What does that mean? And if I think there's like a lot of decks are going to be a lot of the format, I might stray away from a deck that suffers with that. A good example of this might be like, I believe people really like interactive decks, and people like a lot of people, especially RCQ grinders, like exchanging resources. So if my deck is really weak to that, I might want to try to fix that with some sideboard cards or something, or maybe not play the deck, because if, you know, we go off that like percentage, I guess roughly 30% of the room would have been 1-for-1 decks, right? Like Rakdos and Phoenix. And so if my deck really struggles against that, I might not want to play it. A good example of this is Heroic. So that's kind of like a rough, quick breakdown, you know.
One of the other ways to support the show is to leave a YouTube comment. We just short on time today, but I just want to give a shout out to Keegan MTG for the great story in the YouTube comments. Our self-proclaimed #1 YouTube fan. Thank you. If people, let's see here. Sorry, now I'm getting lost. If you want to join the conversation, we have He's Game Media public Discord, our Patreon Discord, which is always popping. Become a patron of $5 or more to get access to that. The YouTube comments like Keegan, as well as just hit us up on Twitter at CCMTG. But always, don't forget, you can like, subscribe, review. Best ways to support the show. Where can people find you, Ed?
You can find me over at twitter.com/morenothings. You know, it's where I tweet about Magic and things and stuff. It's where you can find me most things. That's really all you can find me at these days. How about you, Mason?
You can find me at twitter.com at Mason E. Clark. If you want to reach out for coaching, you can do it there or at my email, masonclark@gmail.com. Find me at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark. I'm actually streaming some more over these holidays while things are a little slower, so that's going to be fun. And you can find me on you can find me at, I'm going to start saying when I'm going to events, so because people are like, oh, I didn't know you were here, I want to meet you. I'll be at Cincinnati SCG January 5th to 7th, which this episode should be coming out like 2 weeks before. So I'll be there. I'll have wristbands. I'll be the one that looks like me and is having a good time. Spencer, where can people find you?
You can find me at Heezy Game on Twitter. You can reach out to me at spencerhowland@gmail.com or heezymedia@gmail.com if you want coaching. That is going to do it for this week. We got to go because we got another episode to record. Bye.